Hey everybody, I'm Scott Allen Miller. It is the 16th of July, 2022, and this is my vlog of daily life in Nicaragua. It is Saturday, and the weather this weekend could be classified as warm, but it's actually really freaking hot. Our actual temperatures today and projected for tomorrow are 94 degrees, but the feels like temperature is 104. It's Fahrenheit, of course. And I can say with all sincerity that they are correct. It feels like 104 degrees. There's not a cloud in the sky. Well, there sort of is, like off in the distance, but there's basically no clouds in the sky. I'm hiding under the bitter orange tree with a bird that just decided to, wow, what two birds just flew into the courtyard and are flying around over my head. That was surprising. And hiding under here to get a little bit of shade because it is too hot to go out there and film. I actually had a different hat on, and the sweat soaked through my hat faster than I could start the camera. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm almost done right there. So it is a really, really hot one. This is supposed to be our winter. This is the rainy season. We have not seen rain in a week. We barely saw rain before that. I haven't really seen much rain at all, except for while we were out of Nicaragua in Guatemala, where it is much cooler and rains, I think, a bit more. We're looking forward to getting some rain back. We're not in a drought or anything like that. It's just the rain cools us down, and it would be nice. We had a ton of rain all at once earlier in the season, but normally there should be some amount of clouds and rain going on now, and instead we are just getting a brutal summer-like situation. So, mostly hiding in the house today and this weekend. I'm going to be doing a lot of editing. I'm learning new stuff on Final Cut Pro, so I'm making this an educational weekend for me. Mostly I hid in the office today. This evening, Luciana and I did a grocery store run together, which we really enjoy doing, and I filmed some of that. So I'm hoping to have some of that footage for you guys tomorrow. So fingers crossed that it came out, and I'm going to be able to talk about it in tomorrow's video. I have a couple of questions that people have asked, so I'm trying to get those in, and I don't want to put them all into one day, so I'm trying to spread it out a little bit to keep you guys interested instead of having everybody watch one video and then be done. You know, algorithms. So today, we did the grocery store. We went up. We didn't get a ton of stuff. We just kind of, but while we were there, she's like, I kind of feel like a special pasta dinner. So we got the fresh-made spinach and ricotta raviolis. And we got the pesto sauce that the girls really like, and we tried a new one that is walnut and I can't remember whatever, but it's a walnut kind of pesto-ish sauce, but it's not pesto. It just kind of gives you that feeling. And we got the pasta. So I came home, I cooked that, and obviously I made grilled cheese for lunch. Did a lot of just cleaning around the house and stuff, but for the most part, it was a work in the office day with the air conditioning going. The girls kind of felt like having a quiet day. Liesl slept a ton today, hanging out with the dogs. The dogs were very needy today. It was just a lot of we're kind of like chilling as a family. And then this evening, the girls didn't feel like playing video games, so Liesl and I watched a couple of movies together, which after we do a binge like Stranger Things like we did yesterday, we tend to be like, oh, let's watch something. Really hoping that tomorrow will be a video game day, but I'm also hoping to get a lot of work done on Final Cut Pro and more different stuff with the camera. I do want to point out, one, I'm filming in my courtyard. This is my office. I can look in the window. I'm so close. And so this is my sort of studio at the moment, and I'd like your feedback on it. Like, is this okay to record in, or is this pretty bad? But sometimes I don't want to go out, especially when there's this much sun. This gives me a little bit of cover, but also I'm filming on the Olympus EM1 Mark II, as I've been experimenting with, but today I'm on the 17mm, also an Zuiko Prime, also f1.8, so we get a little bit of a comparison here. It is super bright sunshine, so I really need this shade because it is just brutal out here. If I was in the sun, this would all be blown out. I do not have ND filters or anything for this size lens, and I don't even have a polarizer, so I'm really limited. This is the lens that is often talked about as being the ultimate travel lens, at least if you're on micro four thirds. It's a wonderful lens. I love using it, but I haven't really done much of the show with it, so I want to see how it works in this setting because the camera has to be a lot closer to me, both with this lens and when we're in here, so it kind of works out in that way. If I was standing in a park with this lens, I'd be like way too close. It'd be like awkward. It's not like the 7.5 where I'd be like practically touching the camera, but yeah, it would be a bit much. I also want to know, are people interested in camera stuff on this channel? Because I would be happy to do camera stuff on this channel. I'm planning on doing a separate channel for cameras because I used to be a professional photographer. I was a photojournalist. I did sports. I've always found photography really interesting. I grew up around it. I have a bit of gear. I'm planning on doing more and more with it. It's a big part of kind of my hobby at this point. And if it's something, because I didn't expect this channel to become a travel channel or a Nicaragua channel or a real estate channel or any of those things. This was really just my daily vlog, and we kind of morphed. And so I do want feedback. Is this something that people would be drawn to? Oh, this would add to the channel. Let's talk about cameras. Or is it like, not really interested, you should have a separate thing so you can go do that somewhere else and we don't have to see it. Let me know, comments below. But so that was my day. And then what we're going to talk about in Nicaragua today, because this question came up, and this is a tough one, right? So I'm going to pop it, hopefully right in this kind of here, and hopefully I remember to do so. So the question is really, Managua, the capital here in Nicaragua, and Guatemala City, often called Guate or just Guatemala, which can be confusing because the country's Guatemala, seem like very different cities. Which do you prefer? Which is better? So again, these things tend to be very loaded questions, and at best you're looking for my opinion. And I'm going to try to give it here, but this is obviously a very difficult comparison. So let's start with a couple obvious similarities. Managua and Guatemala City are both newly constructed modern cities meant to be central capitals to their countries. Now, Managua was much more recent in the 1800s. They really, because Granada and León, where I used to live and where I live now, were the traditional capitals of Nicaragua, and they kind of vied for prominence over a period of time, and the country was kind of like, we're done with you guys. We're going to find something in the middle, and we're going to construct a new large capital city and make that the center of the country so that you guys can stop fighting over it, which was probably a good idea. So Managua is relatively recent, from the 1800s. Guatemala City is a bit older. It comes from, they actually established it in 1776, or it's a little bit older than that, but that's when it became the capital after major earthquakes in Antigua, which had been the previous capital in a long series of capitals, including Tecpan, where we were recently, and Ishimchi, which, if you've heard me talking about, that is the name of the bus line I take a lot. That is named after the first capital of Guatemala, also the first capital of Central America, so it makes sense for a business that travels between all the countries. Okay. So both of these are not super ancient cities. They are both centralized capitals of their respected countries. So that's where their similarities are and kind of where they end. These are cities that are so dramatically different. It's kind of weird to compare because we're not going to be like tweaking things. They're going to be totally, absolutely different. So let's start with population. Managua, the largest city in Nicaragua, has a population of roughly 1.1 million. That's its metro area. We always talk metro areas because that's what matters. City lines are confusing. To get some perspective for at least people from the United States who follow my channel, a lot of you are familiar with upstate New York, where I am from. Managua has the same metro area in population as a Rochester or Buffalo, New York. Both of those are roughly 1.1 to 1.2 million. Their combined metro is 3 million, but ignore that. Each of their cities and its ecosystem is a little bit over a million. At 1.1 million, Managua fits exactly into that category. So for me, it feels like a familiar small city back home. I was born in Rochester and raised closer to Buffalo. You can find similar sized cities all over the United States. It's a very common size for cities to get to. So you have that comparison. Guatemala City, by comparison to Managua, is freaking enormous. It is 5.5 million. So that's exactly 5 times the size. Completely different category of city, completely different feel. You can't have 5.5 million and ever feel like a 1.1 million. At 1.1, you kind of have that giant village feel. And we say that about Managua. Well, it's a city for sure, but it feels like a big village. And honestly, we said that about Rochester, New York growing up. Oh, that's our city. But we considered our local city to be Toronto because it was the only thing nearby big enough to make us really feel like it was a metropolitan metro center. Managua doesn't have that giant conglomerate feel, but Guatemala City certainly does. When you're there, you are in a massive, sprawling, urban center. So that's a big difference right there. If you were looking for that big city feel, Managua simply isn't a big city. It's a city. By every definition, it is a serious city, but it is not a large city. Guatemala City is a large city. It's not a Mexico City. It's not a Sao Paulo. It's not a New York City, but it is a big city. It is in that same kind of feeling category as a Dallas, a Houston, a Philadelphia, those kinds of cities, right? It's probably bigger than San Francisco, right? Like these are large, this is a large city, and by far the largest thing in the region. I don't think there's actually a city in Mexico to rival it in size until you get to Mexico City. I think that Guatemala City is actually bigger than Guadalajara, the second biggest city in Mexico. I think they're about 4.5 million. So that's like an entire Managua on top of the second biggest city in Mexico. So this is a big city by any definition. You drop it in Europe, it's a major city, right? So yeah, it's very important just from a size perspective, and it is the historical capital of Central America. It is the last capital of the combined Central America, so it has that as well. Okay, so one other similarity that both cities have. Both of them are capitals, as I said, and both of them have a historical colonial capital city just outside of their main metro area. For Managua, that is Granada. And for Guatemala City, or Guate, that is Antigua. So they have that like touristy, colonial, historic, used to be my capital city, just a little ways away. And that's kind of an interesting thing that kind of combines them. Both of them are the main airports as well, which should be kind of obvious, but isn't necessarily. So both are transit hubs for the country. What I have found is that Managua remains the sole transit hub for Nicaragua. Guatemala City shares that with Antigua. Antigua is a bit more of a tourist epicenter than a Granada is for some reason, which is surprising because Granada has so much more pull than Managua, whereas Guatemala City should have a lot larger relative pull compared to Antigua, partially because of its size and its modernity and all those things. But Antigua just has so much tourism that it has some amount of transit hub to it. Also, Antigua is slightly more central to the country than Guatemala City, whereas Granada is slightly less central to the country than Managua. So that may be a factor as well. Granada lays on a lake, and making it doesn't have really good transit to that side. And currently, under the current market conditions, they've suspended the ferries on the lake coming from Granada. The ferries are still there, but they don't go to Granada. They go to San Jorge and Rivas instead of to Granada as well, which I hope is something that comes back, just because I love that there is a ferry from Granada. But it kind of gave way to how easy it is to get transit down to Rivas. And we've heard a rumor, it's only a rumor, but supposedly there is some investment returning in rail transit in Nicaragua. We have no idea what that means. We have no idea where, when, exactly what type. There is so many unknowns, and of course, will it really happen? No one's laying tracks. They're just talking about financing now, but those discussions have started, and Nicaragua has long lamented having lost its rail, and we still have rail museums in the country, as does Guatemala, and so it has a lot of potential to revitalize the country, to bring that back. And as a country that is so heavily invested in infrastructure, including roads and boats and those kinds of things, it would make sense for Nicaragua to go in that direction, especially as, and I know some people are going to be like, what about the canal? There has not been a canal, there is no canal, there's no serious talk of canal, and there hasn't been for a very long time. When I was here 7 years ago, it was a running joke that it had never been actually intended and was never going to happen and made no sense. That was 7 years ago. Since that time, Panama completed their other canal. Like, don't mention the canal. It's just, people are upset about it. It was a race against time at best. It was a long shot. It required so many things to fall into place, and it required Panama to not come up with the financing to build a second canal to rival it. Panama did and completed it before they broke ground in Nicaragua. There is no possibility that a pointless tertiary canal is going to be made at insane expense here in Nicaragua. It's just not going to happen. It makes no sense. So don't bring it up, because people do all the time, and it drives those of us who live here crazy, because everyone outside the country is like, everyone talks about the canal. Of course it's going in. And everyone in the country is like, what the heck are you talking about? There's no canal. Never was. Not a thing. And where would it go? It would have to cut right through San Juan del Sur and wipe out the biggest tourist center in the country. Of course, that's not where it's going to go. Like, come on. Anyway, but rail would be an amazing thing here in the country, and could really revitalize tourism, could help with industry, and of course, if that then connected to neighboring countries, wow, the possibilities are just mind-boggling, right? We need this kind of thing in Nicaragua because of the hills, because of the borders, because of the road networks. Even though we have great roads and good infrastructure, rail would make a huge difference to being able to ship in and out. Import and export throughout the region would boom if we had rail once again, and every one of our neighboring countries needs it as well. So, that said, so when you're in Managua And I want to preface this. I like Managua. A lot of people, especially tourists, tend to say, skip Managua. It's a blah city, or it's a terrible city, or it's a dangerous city. It's not worth going to. Just fly in and get out. And if you're only here for a couple days, that sentiment may ring true. Oh, you've got 1 week in Nicaragua? Well, Managua's probably not the thing to go see for 2 reasons. One, you have limited time and you have really amazing things you have to see. Granada, San Juan del Sur, Ometepe, Leon, the beaches at Ponaloya and Las Bonitas. You've got the volcanoes. You've got some amazing things, and you're going to struggle to fit them into your schedule. And this is true with any country, right? If you're on a limited schedule, every country has amazing things. You only got a week. You got to fit in the top things really quickly. And you're not going to be missing variety. If you're coming from, let's just say, the United States, you're used to having fast food, and you're used to having Chinese food and Mexican, and like just all these different selections of things. And every meal is going to be something different. When you go on vacation to Nicaragua, for example, most of the time you're either going to be like, well, I want something basic because I don't want to experiment with food. So you're going to get hamburgers, hot dogs, pizza, like things you can pretty much predict, or you're going to be like, I want local food. I want to experience what Nicaraguans eat. And then you're going to be doing asada, you're going to be doing fritanga, you're going to be doing fried fish, you're going to be doing all these Nicaraguan things, nacatamales, and you're not going to have enough time to eat them all in the meals that you have, and you're not going to have so much time that you're tired of gallo pinto or whatever. So you're going to be eating those things all the time. For those of us who live here, and for people who stay for an extended period of time, you start to find that, well, a lot of Nicaragua, pretty much anywhere except for Granada and San Juan del Sur, is going to have a certain lack of variety in food. Even here in Leon, the second largest city, one full of university students, most of our restaurants carry a relatively similar menu, and we don't have a really large variety of ingredients. That means when we want to go out for, let's say, Italian, we have roughly 2 choices. One small place with just the owner and his wife who work there in the middle of Leon that's not open a ton of time, and one place out on the beach. Both are awesome. Both we go to. That's it. You have 2 small places with very limited menus. That is your entire Italian food options. Pizza, you have a little bit more, but most of your pizza is a certain Nicaraguan style that you may or may not like. You can find some variety. We do have Pizza Hut here, but it's pretty limited. If you don't like the pizzas that are here, there's not much you can do about it. Whereas all those things, if you were to go to Managua, Managua has a giant food scene. You can get all the Nicaraguan foods that you can in the rest of the country, but you also have really nice Mexican restaurants, Italian restaurants, you name it, everything is there. You want to go out for a different type of food every night, the same as if you were in Manhattan, no problem. Managua has an excellent food scene. It may not be huge, but it's really good. You have high quality food, you have low cost food, and you have a good variety. You may have to go all over the city to piece together that variety, but it exists. It's not a problem. So those of us who live farther afield, we love going to Managua just to go eat places. There's like an endless number of restaurants that we want to go check out in Managua and a few other places. So that's important. But if you were to look at it from an absolute number, is there a ton of food variety in Managua? No, not for a city of its size. If you go to Guatemala City, you get very much the opposite. You're getting a giant city with massive amounts of variety and options. Instead of, well, we have every type of restaurant, we have hundreds of every type of restaurant. Instead of we have, good, kind of expensive and pretty cheap, we've got dirt cheap and crazy expensive. We have everything in Guatemala City. So that difference is pretty big. Both of them are going to satisfy that I need variety thing, but Managua is going to do so on a much smaller scale, but it will do it. So if that's something you need, yes, Managua should meet your needs. I'm a foodie. I love going to Managua. I don't run out of things to eat when I'm in Managua. When I'm in Leon, I do. I get tired of things and I'm like, man, I want to go to Managua because yum, yum. I also like going to Granada because they've got a pretty good variety. They have a bigger variety than we do here in Leon, and they have a variety different from what we have in Leon, so that works out just fine. And I like going to San Juan del Sur for the same reasons. They just have, and Jinotepe, which tends to be a food center. If you're looking for, and this may be the most important thing, urbaneness. Just how urbane is the city? It's safe to say, I think everyone I know agrees, that Managua doesn't qualify as urbane. It is barely a metro center. It does have the Galleria, it has the Metro Centro, it has the bus terminal. You can do pretty much everything there, but at no point do you feel like you're centralized in a big city. You don't get high rises ever, but that's because of the earthquakes, not because of the city. They just don't build up. There are, a few high rises. There are some big hotels. There's nice stuff. You can do fancy things, all that you want, but your selection is very limited. And things tend to be pretty distant from each other because it has that sprawling village feel. Basically, it's a city almost entirely built of freestanding buildings. You don't have that packed together city block sensation that you expect in a large city. Even one of 1.1 million, it doesn't have that. If you go to any other of the large cities in Central America, whether that's San Jose and Panama City to the south, Tegucigalpa, San Pedro Sula, San Salvador, Guatemala City, Xela, Quetzaltenango up in the north, all of them are going to have so much more of a city feel than you're going to get in Managua. Some of them are even smaller than Managua and still have a greater city feel. And that makes Managua unique. If you hate that large city feel, if you're not looking for a super urbane culture, but you want the resources of a larger center, Managua may be perfect for you. But most people looking at bigger cities want something urbane. They want high rises, they want fancy restaurants, they want public transportation that feels like a big city, not like the same chicken buses that take you around, or the little sketchy city buses that, not that they're sketchy, but the old buses that just bus you around in rural Nicaragua. Those are the same things that are going on in Managua by and large. You don't get that I'm in a big city feel, and you certainly don't get those high-rise apartments with the baller furniture and decorations and lifestyle and views out the windows and rooftop decks. That stuff just doesn't exist by and large. There's a few exceptions. You can find one or two of those things in Managua, but it's not a lifestyle. But Guatemala City, zone of 10, 14, 16, 4. You've got huge areas. You have areas so large in Guatemala City that you can have just that type of culture in an area larger than Managua from a population perspective, right? It's a completely different thing. So Guatemala City gives you an extreme urban feel, an extreme urbane experience. Managua is very minimally so. So if you're looking for kind of a suburban experience, and this is actually a great way to describe Managua. It's like a 1.1 million person suburb with no epicenter. There's kind of a downtown, mostly around the national capital, the palace, but even that, there's some parks, there's some, basic things that are kind of centralized there, but for the most part, stuff in the city just sprawls all over. If you're in Guatemala City, you can go into Zona 10 and just walk from block to block, and it's just huge number of resources, and every place just, you could be in Europe, right? It feels like a Madrid, it feels like a Rome without the downtown Rome stuff. It could be a neighborhood of Paris, right? All of those things feel that way. There's a ton of urban planning and urban design in Guatemala City. Managua simply doesn't have that. It has some beautiful buildings, it has some great neighborhoods, and if you're looking for that never-ending suburban experience, and that may sound like a negative, right? But I don't mean it to sound that way, because I like Managua a lot, and there's nothing wrong with that suburban lifestyle. If you're coming from the United States, there's actually a really good chance that you don't want the urbaneness of Guatemala City. You may love the gated communities and standalone houses, or nearly standalone houses, that are common in Managua and its outskirts. It's a different experience, but Managua is more of a town that I would describe as I want to take a taxi to go to dinner, or I would really like to get delivery and stay home in my really nice, luxurious home with extra space. Your money is going to get you more square footage or square meters in Managua. Guatemala City is much more of I want to walk out my door and walk to a large number of restaurants without having to take a taxi, and I want to live in a small apartment where it's more expensive, but I get that apartment building kind of feel. And those are very big generalizations, of course, but it kind of explains what you're looking for, right? Guatemala City could give you more of a Mexico City or a New York City style of living, whereas a Managua will not. But a Managua can allow you to afford to live in your own private standalone house and have a yard that you likely could not reasonably afford in Guatemala City, or find. Or at least not find without going very far afield. You also can live in the Managua suburbs and still be just a few minutes outside the city. Places like Ciudad Sandino, or even just a little bit farther away, can give you a true suburban feeling while still being a taxi ride away from the city. And sure, it's going to be a more expensive taxi. You may be spending $10 or $15 to go into the city, and it's going to take 30 minutes. You're going to have to fight traffic, but it's very doable. You want to go in for a Friday or Saturday night out? No question, just hop in a taxi and go. You don't need a car even there, and that's going to make taking that taxi very affordable. You can go do your dinner theater, you can have a nice restaurant, you can go out to a cool bar and go dancing all night. All that stuff is there. You can go to an art gallery in Managua, do shopping at the fancy mall and the food courts and all that stuff. But in Guatemala City, if you wanted to be in a suburb and go in, that taxi ride is going to be really far, take really long, and cost quite a bit more. So it's all about finding that balance. Now, one of the other things you really have to focus on, and this is no one's decision, it's just nature, Managua is a hot city. It's not hot compared to here in León, or especially not hot compared to Chinandega, our city to the north, but it is a relatively hot city. If you're coming from elsewhere in Latin America and say, I want to live in Managua, they will say, whoa, dude, it's hot there. If you live in Managua and say, I'm going to go up to León, they will stop you and be like, you know, it's not cool like Managua. It's hot in León. All perspective. Regardless of where you're coming from, though, if you're going to Guatemala City, it's like, dude, you know, the weather's like perfect and mild, right? Are you prepared for this never-ending perfect weather? Like, yeah, I got it. Like, Guatemala City is absolutely gorgeous from a climatic perspective. Now, if you love the heat, yes, Managua is going to be your better bet. Most people tolerate the heat. You may like the heat because you're going to go to the beach, but in both cities, you could get to the beach in 1 or 2 hours. So neither one has a beach, but both has access to one. It is worth mentioning that Guatemala City obviously has mountains around it. It's up in the mountains. That's why its climate is so nice. So you have beautiful mountain views in every direction, everywhere in the city pretty much. Managua does not have that. It does have some mountains in the distance, but they're very low-lying mountains. They're very far away, not big and close, but it does have a waterfront. It's not a huge waterfront. It's not like the most popular thing, but it does have some nice waterfront, and that is lacking in Guatemala City. So that's a benefit to Managua, sort of, but if you like the mountains better, that's a benefit to Guatemala. But from a weather perspective, I would say 95% of people would look at Guatemala City and say, oh my gosh, this is what I picture as paradise. I want to be able to wear jeans and nice shoes and maybe wear a jacket once in a while, but never have to worry about snow. Managua, it's, I hope they're okay with me wearing a t-shirt and shorts out to dinner because I'm sweating so much, right? So again, perspective. Guatemala City tends to have closed restaurants. You're going to go into a lot of places and they're going to close the door. It might be air conditioned. It may not need to be air conditioned. It may be heated. Managua, almost everything is open air. Nicaragua is an open air country. Guatemala has a lot of open air, but also has closed buildings, right? So that's a different lifestyle. And that's a major way that Guatemala feels more urbane again. When you have everything open air in Managua, you have buildings that are far apart from each other, lots of green areas outside of them, which is beautiful. And you have that wind blowing through everywhere. Even really fancy restaurants, for example, and even a lot of fancy hotels are still predominantly open air. They never seal them off. Even the Hotel Los Robles that I use in one of the most expensive locations in Managua, it's a colonial structure. I don't think it's actually colonial, but it's designed like a colonial structure, and it's just open all over. Your individual rooms are closed, but that's where it ends. Even if you're having breakfast in the fancy French bistro, it is open air to the outside. So it really primarily comes down to what do you want? What are you looking for? Also worth noting, Managua Airport can certainly get you places that you need to go, but it is extremely limited. Managua has direct flights currently to Panama, Mexico, El Salvador, and in some specific cases, the United States. It will have the ones to the US coming back. And it looks like we think that they're now returning the flight patterns to Havana, but that's not confirmed. Guatemala City does not have the biggest airport in the region, but it does have a large one. It can take you all over the world pretty directly with many more connections and probably much better prices. It also has its own local airlines. So almost everything comes down to what are you looking for, what personality in a city do you like. But I will say, if it was up to me and the only thing that mattered was the city, I would choose Guatemala City every day. It is one of my favorite cities in the world. Managua is just an okay city. I do enjoy it way more than most people. However, it is very important to note that at a country level, I live in Nicaragua, and I do so having the option to have chosen Guatemala, to have chosen El Salvador, to have chosen Honduras, and many other countries. I chose Nicaragua. After having lived in 8 different countries, I returned to Nicaragua to make it my home. I made a very conscious choice, a very well-informed one, a very experienced one for Nicaragua. But I also chose not to live in Managua. If I had to live in Managua, I would be perfectly happy. I do enjoy it as a city, and I do enjoy visiting it. I may choose to live on the outskirts rather than downtown. For example, I do like, and I know no one else does, but I do like Ciudad Sandino, and I really like El Crucero. There are lots of areas near the capital in the Managua Departamento that would be absolutely wonderful, and I would love. I don't know if I would want to live downtown necessarily. There are some spots that I would certainly consider: Los Robles, Bologna, Villa Fontana. Those areas are really nice and certainly have some options I would consider, but much more expensive. I would want to have probably a full house there. There are a few places that have apartment buildings, few and far between, and I've not been in them. I hope to. I have a lot of times where I'd like to go see those things and see what they're like, and I hope to bring that to you guys in the future. But Guatemala City, I know that I would want to live downtown. I've countless places that I saw that I know I would love to live in over quite a large area. So many spots that are just dream locations to potentially live in. And I also want to note, while I was there, Valentina was there with me, and she has lived over quite a large number of locations and has been in Europe, in North America, and she immediately, without me prompting, made the same comparison that I had made in my mind, which is that Guatemala City to me felt like a Mexico City. She has lived in Mexico City and is Mexican, so for her to make that statement, for me, it's like, these are two Latin American countries that border each other and their capital cities kind of remind me of each other. That's not a very big statement to make. It's not very meaningful given my context as an American, as an estadounidense. But for her, as having been born and raised in Mexico, having traveled around the world, and having lived in Mexico City for a long time, then to visit Guatemala City and immediately have this is like a slightly smaller Mexico City that's actually cleaner and less busy. And she was very impressed. She loved living in Mexico City, and she left because of COVID. Like, what's the point in paying for the premium Mexico City lifestyle if you can't go outside, right? So she moved to a lower cost city out of practicality. But immediately upon arriving in Guatemala, was like, wow, this is a beautiful Mexico City-like city. And I hate making those kinds of comparisons because immediately it's like, well, it's its own culture, it's its own people, it's its own city. Don't compare it to, just because it's next door, it's not Mexico. And I hate making those comparisons because I don't mean to be like, oh, it's so much like Mexico. Although, to be fair, it was not that long ago that Guatemala City was Mexico. So it is actually, for hundreds of years, a Mexican city and Mexican location. It was just a part of Mexico. Mexico is like the United States. It's a big conglomeration of many things, not as many as it used to be. A whole bunch of them broke off, like Guatemala and Nicaragua, right? But there is a certain reason to make comparisons to Central Mexico because they have a shared history of both. At one point, it would have been, of course, you compare them, they're the two major cities of Mexico, right? So keep that in perspective. But all those things, if I had to choose by city, Guatemala City. But I choose Nicaragua. I prefer it as a country for lots of reasons. But if I had to choose only the weather, Guatemala. I love both countries. I love both cities. I like there's just so much to offer in this region. It's a beautiful region. I love Central America. And for me, if I could have my druthers, if I had a more or less unlimited budget, or even just a slightly larger budget than I have right today, I would want to be based here in Nicaragua, which obviously I am, and I'm very serious about that choice. And I know when we went to Guatemala, Yvonne immediately was like, you're going to get to Guatemala and be sorry you chose Nicaragua. And she says this as a Nicaraguense. But I did not get that feeling in Guatemala. I didn't immediately get there and say, oh, I made the wrong choice. I regret Nicaragua. Absolutely not. But I did get there and go, wow, Guatemala is so beautiful. It is so nice. It is so wonderful. If I couldn't live in Nicaragua and had to choose another place, Guatemala would be such an easy choice to say, wow, I would be so happy living in Guatemala. I am so happy living in Nicaragua, but I would be 99.99% as happy living in Guatemala. And the weather is just so much better. I just love the weather of Guatemala, and I really like the food. And I love so many things about the culture. But in a perfect world, I don't like to sit in any one place, which is kind of what makes me a traveler. Right? And I've been a traveler my whole life. It's always something, I've always sought what's on the other side of the hill, the other side of the fence, the other grass is greener for me, simply by the nature of being the other grass. And for me to have the best experience here in the region, I don't want to be limited to any one city or country. I want this greater, larger regional experience that I hope eventually encompasses all of Latin America, because I truly am fascinated by the region. But within reason, on a day-to-day basis, I think that the zone from Panama City in the southeast to southern Mexico in the northwest makes for a reasonable area that you can travel within and get a really broad range of experiences. They're absolutely lovely. And so what you have to choose is which spot is going to be your home base. Which place makes sense for you? And for me, León makes a lot of sense because it is farther to the northwest in Nicaragua than Managua. The airport at Managua is not particularly useful, especially for me. So the buses coming out of León are actually more valuable than the airplanes coming out of Managua. I can get to Guatemala City from here by road in a reasonable amount of time. And I hope to have a car, we'll say within the next year, at which point Guatemala City will be a 10-hour drive for me, and San Salvador will be something between a 6.5 and a 7.5 hour drive. I'm not exactly sure where it falls, but it's along the road to Guatemala City. And it's not a city that I've been to, and it's the last capital of the region that I have to go visit. I've been to El Salvador, but not San Salvador. It is a city that I have a lot of interests in. I've also not been to San Jose, but I'm going very soon. But Panama City is one of my favorite cities in the Americas. Absolutely love it. But Guatemala City is my number one. It's my number one city in the Americas that I've been to. And I've been to, in the US and Canada, nearly every major city. Truly nearly every major city. The most important city that I have not been to is Vancouver. The most important one in the United States that I have not been to is Salt Lake City. But I've been to nearly every city of both countries. I have been to Mexico City. I have been to Tegucigalpa, all over Nicaragua, parts of Costa Rica, rural El Salvador, but not the capital. Several cities in Guatemala, and all over Panama, because I used to live in Panama. So I have a pretty broad comparative experience, and certainly there's a lot of Mexican cities that I have not been to, and some that I'm sure that I would just fall in love with immediately, right? But of all the places that I've been and all the places that I project would be of great interest to me, Guatemala City is my current favorite that I've been to, and that includes everything, right? My favorite in the US and Canada is Montreal. My favorite in the US is Pittsburgh. I have some pretty eclectic taste in what I really, really love. My favorite to actually live in the US is Dallas, which is why I lived there for a long time. That was very intentional. I did a lot of research. I did a lot of exploration. Dallas just fit really, really well as a living city. Not great to visit, but really good to live in. Pittsburgh, absolutely fantastic. Cleveland, really fantastic. Where I'm from in Western New York, fantastic. These really great regions to actually live in. Barring the weather, that is what, I like Pittsburgh as a city, but the weather is just, it's a no. I'm not going to do it. And then like Buffalo and Rochester, where I was born, absolutely not. Like, never again do I want to experience that snow. No, just absolutely awful. But Guatemala City ranks as my top choice city that I've ever experienced in the Western Hemisphere personally, and Nicaragua is the country that I prefer. So that's what I really want, is to be my home base in Nicaragua with a secondary base in Guatemala, so that I have a apartment in the city to go back to establish a neighborhood that is my neighborhood, restaurants that are my restaurants, and I want to have that. But I don't want it to be my primary residence, I want it to be my secondary residence. That's my perfect world scenario for me here in this region. And to make it absolutely perfect, Nicaragua, Guatemala, and everyone in between, please put in a high-speed rail that just zips between Managua, comes through León, goes through San Salvador, and up to Guatemala City and on to Antigua. That, and on to Quetzaltenango. That would be the perfect. And then extend it to the south, to San Jose and Panama City. So all those cities in a row are on one high-speed rail. That is my dream right there. I don't want to get on a plane. I don't want to take a bus. I want to walk to my local rail station and zip between all those cities. I will make use of all of them all the time. I would be so happy. But short of that, I want the bus line to go where it does. I love it. And I want to be able to drive there and cut the time way down, be able to take all my camera gear, bring you guys along, hit things along the way, do the Ruta de Flores in El Salvador on the way, stop in San Salvador for the night so I don't have to drive the whole way because I'm getting older, I'm getting lazy. Yes, I can do a 27-hour direct drive without even taking a break, but I hate it. I want to do a 10-hour drive with stopping in San Salvador, get some pupusas, do some shopping, enjoy El Salvador for a night, and then go on to Guatemala. That's probably kind of my dream situation. And they've got that beautiful coast. Maybe I'll go do that sometimes. I don't need to own a thing in El Salvador. I can zip around. But having a place in Guatemala City would make me super happy. So it's a goal that I'm looking on how do I work towards that in the future. I hope that that answers your question. That was a lot of detail about those cities, but I have a lot of detail about those cities. And I do want to mention safety because Managua gets a really bad rap. I think people are constantly like, well, you know, Nicaragua's good, but don't go to Managua, it's dangerous. And Guatemala City is a very dangerous city on the world rankings, but let's give some perspective to that. Managua is the most dangerous place in Nicaragua. That alone is a preface that pretty much answers your questions about safety. It's the most dangerous place in Nicaragua. That's like how Bucharesti is the most dangerous place in Romania. Yeah, but Romania is the safest country in the world. It's ridiculous even in Bucharesti how safe you are, right? You're naked with dollar bills taped to you walking around the streets at 3 a.m. drunk. No one's going to take your money, right? Like you're just beyond safe in Romania. It's impossible to describe the safety of Romania. Nicaragua's not that safe. Nowhere in the Western Hemisphere is, but it's a really, really safe country. And that Managua is the most dangerous city doesn't mean a whole heck of a lot. Am I safer in Leon? Yeah, Leon is safer than Granada, but Granada's crazy safe, right? Like you just have to have perspective. So Managua, yes. Least safe in Nicaragua, very safe overall. Compared to, say, American cities, you should never worry at all. Even compared to Canadian cities, it's like, I don't know, Halifax or something, right? Something small and remote. Guatemala City, very different picture. Yes, Guatemala is a very dangerous country, whereas Nicaragua is a very safe country. Those are big general numbers, though, and I don't want you to think of them in that way because just like most of the region, you have isolated danger, and this is true in most dangerous countries, right? It's not everywhere. It may be in rural areas, it may be in gang-controlled areas, it may be in border zones, it may be in very specific cities. And that's the case, right? If you're an idiot and you're in El Salvador or Honduras or Guatemala and you go out to really dangerous areas that are not for tourists, that are controlled by gangs and do stupid things and expose yourself, yes, your level of danger is going to be high, much like going to really dangerous parts of the United States. Everyone talks about the south side of Chicago, but that's not actually that dangerous. What is say, St. Louis or Baltimore or New Orleans, all places that people go and are perfectly safe because even there you have to be an idiot to make it that dangerous, right? Guatemala is just like that. There are really dangerous zones. And in Nicaragua, even though it's an incredibly safe place, if you're really stupid, you could end up in danger too. Nowhere's completely free of danger. Even Romania has had bad things happen to people at some point. So yes, Guatemala has a much higher level of danger than the US or Canada, but it's relatively isolated, and at no point being in Guatemala did I ever feel like I was in some level of danger for real, except for when we did really stupid things and knew we were doing really stupid things. We're like, yep, this is kind of dangerous because we're stupid, but here we are. But you never do it accidentally, and we knew exactly what we were doing within reason, right? And just like Guatemala as a whole, Guatemala City is the same. You have very obvious areas that are quite dangerous, as in any large city is going to happen. And Managua has zones you would never go into, but they're much smaller. And in Guatemala City, you have these areas that are incredibly safe. And I talked to locals, and they're like, yeah, we've been here for 30 plus years. Never met a person who'd been mugged. There's cops everywhere. There's cameras everywhere. It's safe. Everybody's affluent. Everybody's friendly. Everybody's watching out for each other. There aren't a lot of tourists. Where there's a lot of tourists, you get more danger. It's just the nature of tourists, right? It doesn't matter where you are in the world. You go to Paris, you go to Barcelona, you have danger from the fact that there's lots of tourists or even just lots of travelers because they're easy targets, right? They don't know how to get the police right away. They don't know what a safe zone looks like. They don't know what a sketchy person necessarily looks like. They're easy to make mistakes. So if you have an area with lots of tourists, people are going to prey on that. It's just how these things work. In Guatemala City, because they don't have a big tourist zone, they're free of that, same as Managua. So they both have a lot of protection because of that. So if you're living in Guatemala City, you would quickly know, here's a zone that's good, here's a zone that's bad. Don't go to those bad zones. And there's a lot of places that are like, yeah, they're perfectly fine during the day. At night, don't walk around alone. Duh, there's a lot of places like that anywhere, right? So there's no denying the fact that Guatemala and Guatemala City are more dangerous than a lot of countries in the area. But you have to keep that in perspective. They are not reasons not to go to that to that country or those other countries that are dangerous like that. They're just, you need to be more aware and be more conscious of the places that you're going to travel. If you live here in Leon, like I do, I can walk anywhere I can have cash in my pockets. I can do any stupid thing and nothing bad's going to happen to me. And I can do it all the time. And I do every day. Now, I don't travel with anything in my pockets, because I know the dangers that could be there and I know how to protect myself to some degree, so I'm conscious of that and make an effort. But I don't have to, and I would still be safe. So here, you can make a lot of stupid decisions and nothing bad's gonna happen. Guatemala, you need to be a little bit more not stupid to keep yourself safe. But as long as you're not being stupid, you are very safe. I would have no concerns whatsoever going to or taking my family to visit or live in Guatemala and Guatemala City. No problem at all. Just in anywhere in Guatemala, right? Tecpan, Antigua, Lago de Atitlan, Quetzaltenango, all those places, I'd be perfectly comfortable living there long term, even with my children. No fear that something bad is going to happen to them because I'm not stupid, they're not stupid, and the bad things that are happening are not happening to random people much, right? It always does sometimes. It's just not the concern that people often have. So that's a big question. If you're really, really, really concerned about safety, yes, lean towards Managua. However, I would say that very likely the average safety across Managua, because it tends to be kind of more average, is probably not as good as the isolated safety in places like Zona 10 and Zona 14 in Guatemala City, which felt just ridiculously safe, right? I could go out on the street, middle of the night, not worry about a thing, and at no point did I feel like there was any possibility of something bad happening to me. That's probably my cultural oversight. But I felt ridiculously safe, whereas when I go out on the streets of Managua, I'm not worried in any way whatsoever, but I do understand that there's less of a police presence. There's less of a camera presence. I'm a little bit more the only one out at night. That loneliness gives you a feeling of, oh, there is a lot of unlit streets and I could be in a dark corner and someone could jump out. I don't think someone's going to, but that possibility is much higher. Whereas Guatemala City in Zona 10, for example, everything's lit up even at 3 o'clock in the morning. There's no way someone's hiding somewhere. Like, it's a very different experience. So I hope that was useful. I hope that gives you what you were looking for and gives you a good starting point on, do you want Managua or Guatemala City? And then there's the bigger question of, do you want Nicaragua or Guatemala as countries, or something in between, or something further afield? Thanks for joining me. Remember to like and subscribe, please. Give me that thumbs up. It really helps. Tell some people about the channel. We have explosive growth, and we get that, a lot of it, through word of mouth. So if everybody on this channel let one friend know who is really interested in Nicaragua, Latin America, Central America, this region, the information we have here, or just is looking for a vlog of a guy talking to a camera a lot, let them know to subscribe to this channel. It makes a huge, huge difference. I'll see you all tomorrow.